Hey, good morning, everybody. Kevin here with Church versus Charity. It is awesome to see you guys. Today's message, of course, is directed at Christians that want to change their world by being involved in being salt and light. That is the whole point, whether you are a pastor or whether you are an elder board member on your church or charity, or um, the rest of us that are in the pews, in the seats, that want to make a difference. So that takes care of the majority of most people in Canada. Most of us say that we're religious or Christians or whatever association that we stand for. There's a huge chunk of us. So this message is for the majority of Canadians. And yeah, yesterday actually had a great meeting at our church, which was awesome. Um, one of the churches that I attend and go to, and I was able to do a presentation. Yeah, I'll point over there. Uh, was able to do one of our presentations. It was about a half hour presentation. I can give the main highlights in about 5 minutes. Probably the average presentation in its short form would probably be about 15 minutes. And then we, of course, had a lot of dialogue back and forth. The pastor and some of the board members were sitting there. Paul was helping me out too. He's one of the guys that have been kind of coming on board, and me and him have complete opposite personality types. So he's kind of like my opposite. So I can be the bad cop or something like that, and he kind of comes and can reword things in a more merciful, quiet way. I might be a little bit more controversial, but yeah, it was really good, and part of it actually. So it was eye-opening for our pastor. There's a lot of it he didn't agree with because he actually doesn't know. He realizes that he says, "Hey, the original agreement I signed up for was this way, and we were allowed to say everything." And I was warning him that is no, maybe that was the case, but that is no longer the case. So I was warning him, right? Because part of my talk is, hang on, let's see here. Sorry. Part of my talk is kind of this particular slide here in Ezekiel. It's the warning saying, as a watchman, I have to do my job to warn you guys and warn the pastors, warn the churches, warn the individual people that evil is coming, the sword is outside the wall, and we need to do something. And uh, then after that, then I actually say, um, so there's a warning, but then the second slide is you have to heed the warning, or else your blood and the blood of other Canadians' souls and things like that are on your head. So I have to do my job and you have to do your job. So now that you know this message too, you got to do your job and maybe start blowing the trumpet and sharing this message around. So I would appreciate that. But yeah, it was really good because the pastor, he actually brought up a few things. He thought he was free and clear to be able to talk politics and pick his candidates and promote policy. He kind of realized he couldn't talk about Canada. That was discussed in his church before. Some of his board members have warned him on that to kind of self-censor, because they've had dealings with the CRA and charity status issues already, and they said no, be a little on the DL on that, down low. But he thought he could just talk however he wanted to about other countries, and I actually warned him that that is not the case. In the exact same line, it says you can't talk about any government, any level of government in Canada or any foreign country. So that's everywhere. So your missionaries, if you're missionaries, you send them out and they are doing things for or against any public policy, which is everything they do, they are in trouble and your status can be yanked. But anyways, he he did bring up something which was really interesting. He brought up, oh, Trump is going to repeal the Johnson Amendment, and I've never heard that. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, first of all, I told him that, um, yeah, be careful. regardless, because he isn't allowed to talk about Trump and stuff. But this Johnson Amendment was done in like 1854, and yes, if you go to your Wikipedia and stuff like that, um, then that's updated here. So I just typed in Johnson Amendment, and boom, up comes all this. And then I started reading it, and this is the Johnson Amendment. There's Lyndon B. Johnson. Uh, and this is the history, kind of Wikipedia. Not that you can trust everything on Wikipedia, but it's supposed to be pretty neutral. But there's a lot of things that are not neutral. So you can't 100% trust Wikipedia for everything, but it gives you a rough idea. So got me on the right track. So then just even look at this. And then, of course, he has a bunch of news in the last day or so, or 3 or 4 days, that he's focused on repealing this Johnson Amendment, which basically um, will allow, what it is it's not allowing 501c3 charities to be political, right? Not speak out, um, which is interesting. We have the same kind of, this is the whole point in the Canadian side. They've squashed any mention of politics of any of our charities, and there's actually good reasons for that, and I don't disagree with that. Um, maybe I actually disagree with the entire tax um, thing of charities. This whole non-pro giving charities tax breaks, and then you can, and then as donators you can give to a charity and you get a tax break. So you're stealing my tax money to give to somebody that had an income that gave to a charity that I don't agree with, and you're going to give him a tax break? Like, I just disagree with the entire tax thing. First of all, well, taxes in general is basically legalized theft. That being said, we need some we need some taxes. We're not utopia or something, so you do need a minimal amount of taxes. But to take money from me and then allow somebody else to pay less taxes to promote their agendas, I don't disagree. If you want to give $1,000, you get taxed on your $1,000, you give it to whoever you want. That's totally fine. But you should not get no tax breaks. So that's a whole nother talk. But this Johnson Amendment is saying that, yeah, pastors and or any charitable organization can't be political. Fair enough. That's kind of the same rule in Canada. But what is different is Trump is actually talking about eliminating this for churches, which, a lot of churches would be like, yeah, we can have our cake and eat it too, and we can be finally political and stuff. And then there's a lot of people who are like, man, I don't want my pastor to be political. We kind of want it, it's nice that it's neutral. Well, if your pastor starts becoming political, which is actually, you know, anything in life is political, then pick a different church, right? If you want, the Bible says if you're listening to a pastor or something that's or a teacher that's tickling your ears, giving you messages that you want to hear and not the tough messages, well then they're not that good of a teacher or preacher, and they're going to have issues with the Lord anyways when the time comes. But the point is our pastors should be standing up and teaching us how to fight, and uh, we need to defend the innocent. We need to defend uh, uh, the innocent lives of babies that are being killed all the time. So if somebody wants to kill babies, we should actually call them out and say, no, don't vote for that guy. Don't vote for that woman. Don't vote for that party. Vote for this party. This party is trying to fight for freedom. This party is trying to save, women's lives. This thing is for, protecting people, and we should be able to say, hey, vote this way. Don't vote this way. That's up to you whether or not. And then on top of that, if you don't like a pastor or church that talks about that, well, then you're free to pick a different church. But anyways, so that's kind of where I'm on with that is I think all our churches, both Canada and US, everywhere, should be able to talk. I don't agree that they should get tax breaks still and stuff like that. And in the States, as I'm reading this, is pretty interesting because they're talking about that political donations don't get tax rebates. And they were worried that because churches do get tax rebates in the States, that now a ton of money, if this got repealed, they could be political and a ton of money would flow into churches as a way to get their tax break and be political. So you would pick a church that was for your particular party, pour a ton of money in it, get your tax break, and it was all good. That I disagree with too. So I thought that was interesting. In Canada, though, you actually do get a huge tax break by giving money to political parties. So, and you're allowed to give. There's different brackets you can give with different percentages, but it's a fair, decent amount of money. I think it's individually. I think it's $1,500. I'll have to look that up. But you get the first $400, I think it's $400, you get 75% tax deduction on it. Crazy. Like that's good. I don't think it's in the States. So they're kind of arguing something slightly different. Freeing up pastors, Trump's trying to free up pastors to talk because this is a super important thing. This is what our countries are founded on. Whether or not you agree with, you know, a pastor pounding the pulpit and saying who to vote for, well, pick a different church then. But this is what our countries were founded on. And it's huge amounts of institutions that actually help inform people in addition to the media, in addition to self-directed education. We can read books as individuals, we can read newspapers and watch TV, um, and we also go to other people that we trust and we listen to, like pastors and things like that. So they are an institute that does inform general public on general issues. So, anyways, that is interesting. But that being said, um, did have this great talk, and the pastor kind of talked about that, and I told him that he was wrong for talking about Trump or Trudeau or any of our governments or any country. So it was funny because there's not too many times you can tell your pastor is wrong, 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 and I love you, but what you're doing is wrong. And he's like, well, I disagree. That's my opinion is I'm okay. And he says, I better check with my lawyer. And I said, yes, that's the point is I've checked with charity lawyers and I'm checking with more and more charity lawyers. And I was just confirming if what I was reading in plain English or French on the Canadian website was true. And it's very plain. I'm not an intellect by any means. Pretty layperson when it comes to my thinking. I don't like big words and I can read it and I can understand it. So I told my pastor, you read it and check with your lawyers because you will find you are in the wrong. And the majority of churches in Canada are in the wrong. They are in the wrong spiritually for not being salt and light. And if they do attempt to be, they are now in the wrong for breaking their agreements with man, which again, a big part of my presentation is the Lord wants us to be super careful with which agreements we get into because He expects us to honor our agreements. But it is, and then the hope at the end of the tunnel, the other part of the presentation is there's a danger, but then there's the hope to go from being a charity back to becoming a church because the church has freedom of speech and the church has um, a lot of great advantages, um, but not if you're a charity. If you're a charity, you are a government agent and you have no assets. Your church, you're not shrewd with your money, even if you save money for a building or something like that. It all belongs to the public sector, the public sphere of charities. So it does not belong to the church. So that's a whole nother mind-blowing shock is if you buy a building or something, you give money to the church, it's their assets aren't theirs. They're actually working as a government agent, um, self-censoring and stuff like that. So that being said, that is good. Thank you. And if you guys want to book myself or you have comments and questions, definitely contact me. Drop me an email, drop me a comment down below, and I will try to reach you. And you can book us for interviews, small group, video chats, whatever. I'd love to be able to interview you as a pastor, as a lawyer, if you're a charity that has gone through any issues with the CRA, had your status revoked, been threatened to have your status revoked, because usually when you get threatened, you realize some of the big consequences, and then you self-censor. So I encourage you to be salt and light, and to wake up in Canada and start saving some souls, because you've been self-centering, most likely. So, anyways, that being said, thank you very much. And yeah, this is going to be really, it's going to be interesting times.